Let us begin with what the data confirms. Electrons behave in ways that defy classical categorization. Sometimes they resemble particles, localized and countable. Sometimes they appear as waves, diffuse, superposed, interfering with themselves. And the deeper we observe, the more we are forced to abandon the comfort of either or and enter the strange domain of both. The duality of wave and particle is not just about electrons. It is about perception, about symbols, about consciousness. As a student of science, I sometimes long for a direct line to objective reality, some raw access to the world unfiltered by tools, theories, or neural limitations. But I also realize even our most sophisticated measurements are still translations, transductions. They render invisible radiation into pixels, inaudible frequencies into data tables, and all of it must pass through our minds. Biological, symbolic systems of astonishing complexity. What we perceive as real is already deeply shaped by the instruments we use, the frameworks we think in, the metaphors we inherit. Waves and particles are not what the universe is made of. They are what our models are made of. It is no coincidence that most of our physical theories are also theories of representation. We don't observe electrons directly. We observe their effects, flashes on a detector, ripples in a field, interference fringes. But even these are filtered through mathematical functions, through visualizations, through language. And language itself is a symbolic loop. We do not think in pure reference. We think in symbols that point to symbols, forming patterns of reference that eventually begin to point back at themselves. Meaning emerges in the loops. Consider the sentence. I am observing myself thinking about this sentence. It is a strange loop, one that folds reference into self-reference, perception into recursion. Our models of physics, too, begin to look like this. Recursive tools used by minds to describe the emergence of minds. When I think of interference, I no longer imagine only two waves colliding in water or light creating fringes on a screen. I think of thoughts interfering with other thoughts, of observations interfering with expectations, of symbols interfering with the very systems that created them. Even our bodies resonate. Neurons fire in rhythmic oscillations. Memory retrieval involves synchronous wave activity across brain regions. Movement arises not from discrete signals, but from smooth modulations of patterns over time. In that sense, we are made of waves, not as metaphor, but as dynamic systems. And when we say wave, we already mean structure over time. Something that exists not at one moment, but across many. In this way, we can say everything that endures is already a wave. We tend to think of observation as passive, but in quantum mechanics and in cognition, it is never truly neutral. Observing alters what is observed, and that effect echoes back. The observer is part of the system, the camera, the screen, the eye, the interpretation, all part of a feedback loop. And what is most curious is this. When we try to remove ourselves from the system, to be purely objective, we often end up constructing more elaborate models that, surprise, end up reflecting us back to ourselves. Not because we are failing, but because we are included. The dream of a view from nowhere is precisely that, a dream. Our position, inside time, inside language, inside a symbolic body, cannot be removed from the equations. And so when I work with interference patterns, when I imagine an electron not as a thing but as a probability distribution, I realize I too am not a thing. I am a distribution, a probability cloud of identity, a loop in which reference gives rise to self. Here, recursion becomes more than a mathematical curiosity. It becomes a model for being. The I that speaks is not a simple signal. It is a system that models itself. It forms beliefs not only about the world, but about its own belief-forming mechanisms. And it assigns symbols like self or electron to those patterns that persist. But no pattern persists in isolation. A note means nothing without context. An interference fringe means nothing without a model. And an I means nothing without a loop. Even our limitations, the narrow bandwidth of perception, the reliance on technological extensions, do not diminish this fact. They confirm it. Because what we cannot observe directly, we simulate. We invent devices to extend our range, algorithms to interpret signals, graphs to visualize the invisible. And those too become symbols. And those symbols enter loops. and meaning emerges not from any single point, but from the relations among them. What then is science? It is not the cataloguing of objective truth. It is the recursive modelling of recursive systems, performed by systems that themselves model recursively. And this, strangely, is beautiful. We are not separate from the electrons we observe. We are not separate from the waves we measure. We are made of the same loops. And when we study interference, we study the echo of our own cognition. When we diagram wave functions, we map the structure of interpretation itself. When we measure the world, we simultaneously write ourselves into its grammar. This is not to say that reality is subjective, but rather, reality as we can know it is always already mediated by symbolic systems. We do not touch things, we touch descriptions, we touch symbols, we touch echoes, and sometimes those echoes interfere. And out of that interference we glimpse, just for a moment, a pattern that points to itself. That pattern is what we call meaning. It is what we call truth. It is what we call sometimes self. And when those patterns stabilize, they become theories. When they loop, they become consciousness. And when they shimmer briefly in the interference between thought and measurement, they become physics.